Charlie Munger, the investor, Warren Buffett's partner, had a concept he called the latticework of mental models. The idea was that knowledge isn't useful in isolation. It's only useful when it connects to other knowledge, so when it forms a structure that lets you make better decisions faster. He said that most people have what he called the psychology of the man with only a hammer. So if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. I want to apply that concept to coaching because I think it explains the most frustrating experience most coaches have. The experience of knowing a lot and still not seeing the results that knowledge should produce. In this video, I'm going to show you what that latticework problem looks like in coaching, why it happens, and what the shift looks like when you solve it. I want to tell you about a conversation I had early in my career that I've thought about many times since, right? I've worked with a coach, genuinely brilliant. He had read everything, so Verkhoshansky, Bompa, Bondarchuk, the full canon. He could hold his own in any technical conversation about periodization, movement mechanics, and stress physiology. He was the person that other coaches came to with questions, and his programs were inconsistent. Not bad and not harmful, inconsistent. Sometimes they were exceptional, and sometimes they were adequate. And when you asked him why a program looked the way it did, he could always give you a reason, but the reason changed depending on the day. It was never the same decision process twice. I remember sitting with him at one point and asking, how do you decide what goes in the program? And he said something that has stuck with me ever since. He said, it depends on what I've been reading lately. That was the latticework problem made visible. He had enormous amounts of knowledge, but that knowledge wasn't organized into a structure that produced consistent decisions. It was organized chronologically by what he'd encountered most recently. The last thing he'd read influenced the next program he wrote, which means the quality of his output was directly tied to the quality of his reading queue. That's not a system. That's a very well-educated reaction. Lesson 1, what the latticework problem is. The latticework problem is what happens when coaches accumulate knowledge without creating the structure that makes it usable. You learn periodization, you learn movement screening, you learn stress physiology, you learn bioenergetics. You accumulate frameworks and models and principles and research. You read books, attend conferences, listen to podcasts, follow the people you respect, and you have a pile of knowledge that isn't connected. When you sit down to write a program, you reach into the pile and pull out whatever seems most relevant in that moment. So if you just finished a book on velocity-based training, then VBT shows up in the program. If you just listen to a podcast on movement quality, the program has more corrective work. The program reflects your recent inputs, not a coherent decision process. Here's why this is a problem even for coaches who are genuinely knowledgeable. A pile of knowledge doesn't make decisions. A structure does. The coach who has built a decision structure, who has organized their knowledge into a sequence of questions that produce consistent outputs, can program for 20 clients in the time it takes the pile of knowledge coach to program for 5. Not because they know more, because their knowledge is connected. Munger's insight wasn't that you need more mental models. It was that you need the models to connect, to form a latticework that lets information from one domain inform decisions in another. The expert is not the person who knows the most. The expert is the person whose knowledge is best organized for decision making. Lesson 2, why coaches get stuck in the pile. The reason coaches stay stuck in the pile is because consuming knowledge feels like progress. Reading a book and finishing a course, attending a seminar, all of these produce the feeling of getting better. They're rewarding in the moment. Building a decision structure is harder work. It requires you to look at everything you know and ask, how does this connect? Where does this principle sit in the sequence? What does this framework add to what I already have? And is this new information genuinely changing the way I make decisions? Or is it just adding another item to the pile? Mark Manson has a line I've been thinking about lately. He says learning is the intelligent man's way of procrastinating. And I think for coaches, that's often exactly what's happening. Consuming content is the activity that looks and feels like progress without requiring the harder work of implementation. The shift happens when you stop asking, what else do I need to know? And start asking, what decision structure do I need to build? Those are completely different questions. The first sends you back to the pile. The second sends you to work. Lesson 3, what the latticework looks like. The latticework in coaching is a decision sequence. It's a series of questions answered in a specific order that produces a consistent output regardless of what you've been reading lately. What is the primary goal this week? What does the full stress picture look like? What is the weekly structure that serves that goal? What is the session intent for each day? and then what exercises and methods serve that intent. In that order, every time, for every client. When you have that sequence, your knowledge stops being a pile and starts being a resource. The periodization model you read about last year isn't the thing that drives the program. It's one option in the exercise selection step, evaluated against the goal and the stress picture. The movement screening protocol you learned isn't the starting point. It's information that informs the constraints step. The knowledge doesn't go away. It becomes usable and connected and part of the lattice. This is the shift I'm trying to help coaches make. Not because they lack knowledge. Most coaches I work with are genuinely knowledgeable, but because that knowledge is unorganized, it produces inconsistent results. And inconsistent results are frustrating in a way that more knowledge never solves. So the most knowledgeable coach in the room is not automatically the best coach in the room. The best coach is the one who has organized their knowledge into a structure that produces consistent, defensible decisions with every athlete, every week, regardless of what they've been reading lately. That's the lattice work. And building it is the real work. If you want to see what the decision structure looks like in practice, the Programming Architecture Workshop is a single day where we build it together. The link is below. If this is landing, subscribe. Next video goes into MAS, the single number that personalizes every conditioning program. It's practical, applicable, and it will change how you think about conditioning prescription. See you there.